Hello, Tom Maguire. I just want to do a review on the absolutely fantastic book Land of Men, Wind, Sand and Stars by Antoine de Saint-Exupery. So, fantastic name, fantastic book. I didn't know anything about this book until a few weeks ago. I'm really glad I read it. It's another one of those books that's going to stick with me for quite a while. It's another one of those books, a bit like The Peregrine, that I will be reading again at some point in the future. It's fantastic. I have a particular interest in flying. I fly fixed wing microlights whenever I get a chance. I didn't get a chance at all through 2020 with COVID-19. I didn't want to take any risks of being in a cabin with someone. It was too much of a risk in terms of the virus, but I intend to get back to it again this year. So I haven't yet got my license, but it's something that I'm intending to get my license at some point, and I just really enjoy it. I'm just fascinated with flying. I think it's fantastic. I just think having that freedom to be up there and just coast around and just look down at the ground and just, explore different places. It's just magic to me. And this book is really quite a magical book, actually. The guy, Antoine de Saint-Exupery, is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not, but he's just a fantastic writer. A bit like J.A. Baker in The Peregrine. Obviously they're completely different, but a bit like him, it's just in another league, basically. It's just really nice. I think when you get to kind of this level of quality of writing, these sort of books are so original that I think I'm not alone in saying that they're quite hard to kind of start with. You almost feel as though you're struggling a bit to begin with because they have that air of kind of weirdness around them. But once you start to click with this kind of book and your mind starts to kind of get into it, it's really quite exciting because it almost feels like it's opening up other parts of your mind and your brain, and you feel as though you're kind of growing as you get through the book. So it's been described as one man's meditation on what it means to live. And he's basically kind of giving his view as he's basically a pilot, but he's kind of a delivery pilot, and he's flying across Europe in the days when it was really, really dangerous to do that. It's a series of essays. He's a famous French aviator. And each of the book's 8 main chapters are basically accounts detailing his time as an international postal pilot during the 20s to the 1930s. This was basically a time when international flight routes were still being established, and it was really, really risky. They were kind of considered, they had this sort of heroic sort of status in a way. Obviously aircraft back then were, aircraft hadn't even been invented for very long, particularly back then. Safety records were pretty poor, engine failures were pretty common. At one point he says when the engine stops, the aeroplane drops over the Spanish mountains. There are some fantastic quotes in this book as well. I'll read a couple of bits to you in a little while. But yeah, the sense of kind of danger is just constantly there. You never really feel sort of comfortable when he's kind of talking about when he's got you in the cabin with him. So basically the idea is that kind of the solitude that he had in his journeys, in his piloting journeys, and the sort of distances that he needed to fly, he kind of found the time and the space to kind of think about humanity. He was often sort of dancing with death. He was always very close to death. He was always very kind of aware of how vulnerable that he was. And I think he also, he talks about kind of colleagues and things and how they become even more important when you realise that when you've lost some colleagues, when you've lost some friends. It's always that kind of dicing with death thing that's kind of given him a really interesting sort of perspective. And I think that's really important to personal development. I know this channel, I always say, is a personal development channel. I'm basically here to read as many books as I possibly can to develop myself, to improve myself, because I enjoy reading so much. I enjoy personal development, and to share those kind of experiences and the lessons learnt with you on this channel. But I do sometimes read books like this that certainly aren't strictly personal development books, but they are very relevant. A lot of his, if you look him up, Antoine de Saint-Exupery, if you look up his quotes, Goodreads or something like that, there's some really interesting sort of lessons there to be learned. And kind of something that he's always sort of talking about and sort of almost feeling sort of sad about, I suppose, is kind of the loss of human potential. And towards the end, he sort of talks quite clearly about sort of the drudgery of industrial life and how he considers himself to be really lucky to be a pilot, even though it's really dangerous, really risky. He looks at these people who kind of work in these really horrible sort of factories and things, and he kind of finds it fascinating how the human spirit is just destroyed. And he's kind of talking about how everyone's got so much potential, everyone's a potential, or people are almost sort of potential Mozart, potential genius kind of thing. And he sees that, and he just sees that life kind of crushes that out of people. So I find that really interesting. Yeah, in the opening chapter of Wind, Sand and Stars, he writes the following passage. I'll read it out to you quickly. So, "Old bureaucrat, my comrade, it is not you who are to blame. No one ever helped you to escape. You, like a termite, built your peace by blocking up with cement every chink and cranny through which the light might pierce. You rolled yourself up into a ball in your genteel security and routine in the stifling conventions of provincial life, raising a modest rampart against the winds and the tides and the stars. You have chosen not to be perturbed by great problems, having trouble enough to forget your own fate as a man. You are not the dweller upon an errant planet, and do not ask yourself questions to which there are no answers. Nobody grasped you by the shoulder while there was still time. Now the clay of which you were shaped is dried and hardened, and naught in you will ever awaken the sleeping musician, the poet, the astronomer, that possibly inhabited you in the beginning." So it's kind of this idea that he realises how kind of privileged he is in his position, because he's kind of sort of aristocratic blood. So he came from a very privileged kind of background to begin with. But he very much kind of gives the impression and talks about how privileged he is to do what he does, even though he's kind of dicing with death. And he kind of looks at other people and just thinks, wow, you've all got so much potential. I get to see life from up here, and I get to experience what it means to lose people all the time. And yeah, it's just such an interesting book. I'm not going to give any spoilers, so the more I talk about it, the more likely I am to say something that kind of spoils the book a little bit. I don't want to talk about, I almost did it then, I don't want to talk too much detail. It's just literally just the fact that so he is basically talking about some of his adventures. He's giving you some of his adventures. You're very much brought with him on his journey. The description, the imagery is fantastic. It's just got that real unique, that real original kind of feeling to it. I massively enjoyed it. And I don't think I enjoyed it just because I'm into flying, because to be fair, if anything, I was a little disappointed actually there wasn't a bit more detail around the kind of flying side of things. It is very much more a philosophical kind of dialogue about the meaning of life and kind of how he sees that. There isn't a lot about flying in there at all really, other than the kind of scary stuff that he kind of takes you through as it happens. So in some ways I was a tiny bit disappointed by that, but I suppose in some ways the book is probably better for that really, because it's only really kind of like flying geeks like me that will kind of appreciate that, I suppose. And actually the other stuff is a lot more important, a lot more interesting anyway. So yeah, this is definitely like a 5-star book. This is, I've been really lucky this year. I've made a few mistakes this year, actually. I've started a couple of books that I haven't finished, which is quite unusual for me, but I've also read a couple of books that are absolute top-notch 5 stars. So it's this one, and also The Peregrine by J.A. Baker, which I've also reviewed. There's another book, which I've just literally finished listening to on Audible by Merlin Sheldrake, called... I can't remember what the heck it's called now. Anyway, I can't remember what it's called. I'll edit it in afterwards. I'm going to do a review of that one as well fairly soon. Yeah, and I'm reading a book at the minute called 10 Drugs, which is really interesting as well. So I'm looking forward to doing a review on that one. So, what else? Yeah, I'm a little bit behind at the minute with the reviews. I'm kind of getting through stuff quite quickly, but this book, I highly recommend it. I can't kind of do it credit really or justice by reviewing it. It's an absolute masterpiece, really. But yeah, really, really good. Really enjoyed it. Speak again soon. Cheers.